Beneath the streets you walk every day, medieval secrets wait in silent darkness. These hidden rooms were not just architectural quirks, they were vital tools for survival, protecting everything from outlawed priests to royal fortunes. You are about to explore 30 subterranean passages, treasury nooks, and archive cells you can still visit today, uncovering the ingenious designs and desperate stories sealed within their walls. By the end, you will see history not as a distant fact, but as a tangible world of intrigue lying just out of sight. What desperate prayer was whispered in a sealed cell, and what priceless treasure was hidden behind a moving staircase? When you stand in a familiar place, what hidden history do you think is resting just beneath your feet? England in the 1580s was a place of quiet fear for many. To practice the Catholic faith was to risk everything, and the priests who ministered to the faithful lived as hunted men. Their survival depended on a new kind of architecture, one of deception and shadows. The priest hole at Harvington Hall stands as a masterwork of this desperate craft. Built by the ingenious carpenter Nicholas Owen, these hiding places were not mere cupboards. They were fully integrated secrets, woven into the very fabric of the house. A section of paneling might swing inward to reveal a narrow cavity. A floorboard could lift to show a cramped space beneath, just large enough for a single person to crouch in silence. The most clever were those hidden within the structure of a chimney breast, where the warmth from adjacent flues could stave off the cold during a long, terrifying concealment. These rooms were built for endurance. Thin ventilation shafts, often disguised as part of the normal brickwork, allowed a hidden priest to breathe during searches that could last for days. The entrance to one particularly clever hide at Harvington is concealed within a movable staircase. Imagine the precision required, the silent pivot of the steps that could erase a man from sight in moments. To stand in that hall today is to feel the weight of that silence. You are in a space that meant the difference between life and a traitor's death. It was a sanctuary carved from sheer necessity, a physical manifestation of faith under pressure. But not all hidden chambers were built for protecting people. Some were designed to guard something just as precious and far more glittering, the immense wealth of the crown. While faith found refuge in priest holes, royal power secured its lifeblood in stone. Deep beneath the great keep of Dover Castle, a treasury vault was carved directly into the bedrock. This was not a space for people, but for the very foundations of the kingdom. Guarding the shortest sea crossing to the continent, Dover was England's front door, and its vault was the locked box where the crown kept its most vital assets. Behind iron-bound doors and complex locking mechanisms lay not just chests of gold and silver coin, but something even more crucial, the documents that legitimized royal rule. Charters granting lands, treaties securing alliances, and proclamations asserting authority all found sanctuary in this subterranean stronghold. The architecture itself was a statement of absolute security. Barrel-vaulted ceilings distributed the immense weight of the castle above, while walls of thick stone shrugged off the threat of siege engines. Some such chambers included clever deceptions, with hidden compartments concealed behind false altars or under heavy flagstones, creating a secret within a secret. The location within the heart of the keep made the vault nearly impregnable, a final redoubt for the kingdom's wealth. Can you envision the officials descending the narrow stairs, a single lantern casting long shadows, to deposit a new treaty that would change the map of Europe? The treasures held here did not just represent money, they were the instruments of statecraft, the physical keys to power and stability. This obsessive protection of material wealth had a parallel in the safeguarding of another precious resource, knowledge. And it is in the silent, hallowed spaces of monasteries where we find the next layer of hidden rooms, built not for gold, but for the written word. While royal vaults secured gold and treaties, a different kind of treasure was being preserved in the soaring Abbey of Mont Saint-Michel. High within its stone walls, far from the communal life of the cloisters, a hidden scriptorium cell offered a sanctuary of silence. This was not a room for hiding people, but for safeguarding the very act of creation itself. In these small, dimly lit chambers, monastic scribes dedicated their lives to copying and illuminating sacred texts. Secluded in remote towers or tucked behind choir stalls, the cell was a world of focused solitude. A single writing desk held a stretched parchment, while shelves nearby stored precious pots of ink made from crushed minerals and delicate brushes of animal hair. The only sounds were the scratch of the quill and the slow breath of concentration. For hours that stretched into days and years that stretched into a lifetime, these men worked. Their labor produced breathtaking masterpieces like the Book of Hours, where intricate borders of gold leaf and vibrant illustrations transformed prayer into a visual symphony. The creation of a single page was an act of profound devotion, a physical merging of art and faith. Fragments of these illuminated pages have been discovered in hidden niches at Mont Saint-Michel, silent witnesses to the immense dedication that filled these rooms. How did such seclusion ultimately serve a wider world? In an age of instability, these intellectual havens became fortresses for knowledge itself. While scribes preserved culture in their silent cells, other hidden rooms were designed for a far more visceral purpose, the raw and desperate need to escape a sudden siege. The silence of a hidden scriptorium was a world away from the desperate urgency of a siege. When an army surrounded the walls and food supplies dwindled, survival depended on a different kind of hidden room, one that offered not sanctuary but escape. Beneath the great Château de Chinon in France, a secret tunnel was carved deep into the limestone bedrock. This was not a mere passageway, it was a strategic lifeline, a hidden vein connecting the besieged fortress to the safety of the outside world. During the long turmoil of the 100 Years' War, such tunnels were engineering marvels of their time. Their entrances were masterpieces of deception, often hidden in plain sight as the bottom of a well, a section of a cellar floor, or a shadowy alcove behind a heavy tapestry. Once inside, you would find a cramped, dark corridor, its ceiling shored up with heavy timber frames to prevent a catastrophic collapse from the weight of the castle above. The air would be cool and damp, the only sound the echo of your own frantic breathing. These tunnels served a brutal dual purpose. They allowed besieged nobles, messengers, and soldiers to slip out unseen to gather intelligence or summon reinforcements. But they could also be used to launch a devastating surprise attack, with armed men pouring out of the ground behind enemy lines. The tunnel at Chinon is steeped in legend, said to have been used by Joan of Arc herself during her historic meeting with the Dauphin. Can you feel the cold stone under your hand, moving through utter darkness with the hope of a kingdom resting on your silence? This was architecture as a tool of war, a calculated gamble carved in stone. Yet for all their strategic genius, these escape routes represent only one facet of medieval ingenuity. Beyond the grand dramas of war and faith, hidden spaces were also woven into the fabric of daily life, serving needs that were both practical and deeply personal. Even the most mundane daily routines could mask a hidden passageway. Within the private quarters of Warwick Castle, a simple guardrobe served a double life. This was the medieval term for a toilet, a small chamber built into the thick castle wall. But at Warwick, this utilitarian space concealed a secret. A discreet passage, accessible from the Guardrobe itself, was used for the quiet disposal of waste, with a chute leading down to the river below. Yet this was not its only purpose. The passage also functioned as a covert access point, allowing servants or guards to move through the castle walls completely unseen, bypassing the busy main corridors. The Guardrobe was a marvel of multifunctional design. Its recesses, often built with stone seats and ventilation shafts to manage odors, were sometimes used to store valuable clothing or documents. The logic was simple. The strong, unpleasant smell was thought to be a powerful deterrent to thieves, so a noble might stash a locked chest in the small chamber, trusting the foul air to protect their possessions. At Warwick, evidence suggests a guardrobe might have even led to a small, hidden room used for the temporary storage of sensitive papers. How did a space dedicated to such a basic human need become a secret hub for security and stealth? This ingenious blending of the utterly practical with the covert reveals a mindset where no architectural feature served just one purpose. This same principle of hidden utility extended even to the most personal and spiritual aspects of life, guiding the design of secluded spaces for quiet contemplation. Within the stone walls of a village church, a life of radical solitude unfolded. At Sheer Church in Surrey, a small cell was permanently sealed into the very fabric of the building, home to an anchorite. This was not a prisoner, but a religious recluse who had taken a solemn vow to live in that single room until death, dedicating their entire existence to prayer and contemplation. The cell was a stark space, furnished with only the most basic necessities: a narrow bed, a simple stool, and perhaps a small table. Its only connection to the outside world was a small window or hagioscope, which looked directly onto the church altar. Through this opening, the anchorite could participate in Mass and receive communion, hearing the prayers of the congregation without ever joining them. They were physically entombed within their faith, a living symbol of devotion that both unnerved and inspired the medieval community. The cell at Sheer was rediscovered during renovations, its walls bearing faint graffiti and its floor holding small, personal artifacts. These silent marks offer heartbreaking glimpses into a mind grappling with eternity, the simple scratches on stone speaking of daily routines and profound spiritual struggles. What profound inner calling would lead a person to willingly embrace such a confined existence? This was faith pushed to its absolute extreme, a personal sacrifice that reflects the immense power of belief in the medieval world. Such intense, personal devotion existed alongside spaces designed for the protection of an entire community, leading us to the hidden rooms that secured the most vital resource of all: food. A community's survival often hinged on what lay hidden beneath its feet. Within the fortified walls of Carcassonne, beneath the cobblestones of its courtyards and the foundations of its houses, a network of grain silos was carved directly into the bedrock. During a siege, when enemy forces surrounded the city, these subterranean chambers became the beating heart of its defense, safeguarding the food and water that would determine whether its people lived or starved. Their design was a masterclass in practical secrecy. Concealed entrances, perhaps hidden under a movable stone slab or a layer of earth, kept their precious contents safe from fire and raiding parties. Archaeologists have found that these silos were meticulously lined with plaster to keep the grain dry and free from rot, preserving it for months or even years. A single one of these pits could hold enough provisions to sustain a family, and a network of them could feed the entire city through a long and brutal blockade. The discovery of these spaces in modern times adds a deeply human layer to their story. Excavations have uncovered fragments of pottery, simple tools, and other everyday items left behind by the people who managed these vital reserves. How many historical conflicts were decided not by a dramatic battle on the walls, but by the silent, patient endurance made possible by these hidden stores? This practical genius for concealment, born from the stark need for sustenance, would be refined and adapted for a more delicate purpose: the secret diplomacy that unfolded in chambers built for whispered conversations and clandestine pacts. Even the most sacred halls of power required a space for secrets. Within the immense stone complex of the Palais des Papes in Avignon, a hidden council chamber was built for the private deliberations of popes and cardinals. During the Avignon papacy, when the seat of the church was far from Rome, this room became the epicenter of clandestine diplomacy, reached by a discreet staircase or a door seamlessly blended into a paneled wall. It was a world apart from the public ceremonies. Inside, the air was likely thick with incense and whispered negotiations, the walls adorned with rich tapestries, and the room furnished with intricately carved chairs. Here, far from the ears of rival factions and foreign ambassadors, the future of nations was decided. Treaties were forged, religious decrees drafted, and political alliances sealed with a handshake. The very existence of this room speaks to the immense political pressures of the time, a place where the spiritual authority of the Church grappled with the raw realities of earthly power. What profound decisions, what compromises made in shadow, echoed from this chamber to alter the map of Europe. The need for such absolute privacy among the highest ranks of society did not end with matters of state. This same desire for seclusion extended into the most intimate aspects of royal life, leading us to hidden rooms that served as personal sanctuaries far from the demands of the crown. A queen's life was a performance of constant visibility, yet at Stirling Castle, Mary, Queen of Scots, could retreat to a world of her own. Tucked within the royal apartments, her private oratory was a small, hidden chapel, a sanctuary of silence built directly into the stone walls. This was not the grand chapel for public worship, but a profoundly personal space for prayer and reflection, a refuge from the relentless politics of the court. The room would have been intimate, perhaps illuminated by the soft, colored light filtering through a stained glass window. A simple prie-dieu, a kneeling desk for prayer, might have stood before a small altar adorned with a religious icon or a crucifix. Niches carved into the walls held beeswax candles, their flickering light dancing across painted murals, while a single bench offered a place for quiet contemplation. Experts believe such oratories often contained hidden compartments, perhaps within the paneling or under a floor tile, used to safeguard sacred objects like a personal rosary or even a private journal. In this enclosed space, a queen could shed the weight of her crown, expressing her fears, hopes, and faith without an audience. How did this simple room provide not just comfort, but a rare sense of agency? For a woman like Mary, navigating a world of powerful men, this spiritual refuge was a fortress for her inner self. This deeply personal need for a creative sanctuary finds a powerful echo in another kind of hidden room, one dedicated not to prayer but to the preservation of art and memory. Music itself was given a hidden chamber to amplify its divine power. High within Canterbury Cathedral, a minstrel's gallery is carved into the stone, an elevated platform where musicians performed completely unseen by the congregation below. Concealed behind intricate stone screens on the triforium level, these galleries were a masterstroke of acoustic design. From this hidden vantage, the voices of chanters and the sound of early organs would pour down, their source a mystery, filling the vast space with what seemed to be a heavenly chorus. The effect was intentional, transforming the music into an ethereal presence, a direct gift from God that enveloped the faithful in a cloud of sound. Access was via impossibly narrow, spiraling staircases built within the walls, a journey that kept the musicians and their mundane preparations entirely separate from the sacred spectacle. These galleries were not empty stages, they were working spaces storing precious hand-copied scores and carefully maintained instruments like psalteries and shawms. Can you hear the ghost of a chant echoing in that stone cavity, a melody designed to lift the human spirit toward the divine? This architectural secret shows how medieval builders manipulated not just space, but the very senses to create an experience of wonder. Yet this spiritual use of concealment had a direct parallel in more earthly pursuits, where the secrets of nature were probed in rooms hidden away from prying eyes. The quest to transform base metal into gold was a dangerous secret. Deep within the stone walls of Wartburg Castle in Germany, a hidden alchemist's laboratory was a sanctuary for such forbidden experiments. Tucked away in a secluded tower or a forgotten cellar, this room was a world of fire and mystery, shielded from the suspicion of the church and a fearful public. A central furnace glowed with intense heat, used to melt metals in clay crucibles. Shelves lining the damp walls held an apothecary's strange inventory, jars of mercury, sacks of sulfur, and bundles of rare herbs, all ingredients in the grand pursuit of the philosopher's stone. This was not mere superstition, but a complex blend of early science and spiritual belief, where the transformation of matter was thought to mirror the purification of the human soul. The alchemists who worked here, their identities often protected by noble patrons, left behind cryptic manuscripts written in complex codes to protect their discoveries. Archaeologists have uncovered the physical remnants of this secret world, fragments of specialized glassware like alembics for distillation and beakers stained with long evaporated elixirs. Every scratch on a workbench, every soot mark on the ceiling tells a story of trial, error, and tremendous risk. How many of these failed experiments, these patient recordings of reactions and results, quietly laid the groundwork for the modern science of chemistry? The patient processes of distillation and the meticulous cataloging of materials in these hidden rooms provided a tangible, if secret, foundation for future discovery. This clandestine preservation of knowledge finds a direct parallel in the next type of hidden room, where the goal was not to create something new, but to protect something very old, the written records of history itself. A single room secured the legal foundations of an entire region. The charter room at Durham Castle was far more than a simple storage closet. It was a fortress for paperwork, a hidden archive where the most important documents of church and state were kept safe from fire, theft, and decay. Tucked away within the castle's formidable walls, this chamber was designed for absolute security. Inside, iron-bound chests, some secured with multiple and complex locks, held the priceless parchments that defined power and property. Land grants from the bishop, legal decrees, and tax records were meticulously organized on specially built shelving, each scroll or ledger a tangible piece of the administrative machinery that governed daily life. Some of the documents stored here dated all the way back to the time of the Norman conquest, their vellum pages still bearing the heavy wax seals of long-dead kings and the marginal notes of scribes. The room itself was an active participant in this preservation. Its location within the thick stone keep provided a consistently cool and dry environment, protecting the delicate animal skin parchment from the destructive damp that could ruin it in a single season. To unroll one of these charters today is to hear the distant echo of a medieval courtroom or a property dispute settled centuries ago. What can a list of tenant farmers or a record of a grain tithe tell us about the people who lived under these rules? These were not dry administrative details, they were the very wires that held the tapestry of society together. This meticulous protection of legal authority finds a dark counterpart in the next type of hidden room, where power was not archived on parchment, but exercised through stone and shadow. A watchman's gaze could mean the difference between a castle's salvation and its ruin. High within the stone battlements of Chepstow Castle, a hidden observation post was carved into the very fabric of the gatehouse, a slit in the stone so narrow it was nearly invisible from the outside. From this cramped perch, a solitary guard would stand for hours, his world reduced to a thin vertical slice of the landscape, monitoring the approach of the River Wye. He could see everything: the glint of sunlight on a distant helmet, the slow progress of a trade barge, the telltale dust cloud of an approaching column, while remaining completely unseen. These posts were masterpieces of defensive architecture. Access was often a treacherous climb up a ladder hidden behind a false panel, or through a low, twisting staircase within the thick wall. Some featured ingenious communication systems, like a narrow lead or clay pipe built into the stonework, through which the watchman could whisper a warning to the soldiers in the chamber directly below. At Chepstow, this silent vigilance over the major waterway was crucial, turning the castle into an unblinking eye that controlled all river traffic and guarded against invasion from the Welsh marches. How many battles were won not by brute force, but by the intelligence gathered in these stone cells, by a single man who saw an enemy army hours before it arrived? This constant, hidden surveillance provided the nervous system for a castle's defense. Yet for all their strategic importance, these posts of solitary watchfulness represent only one side of medieval secrecy. The same walls that hid a watchman's gaze could also conceal spaces dedicated to a very different human need: the warmth of secret hospitality and forbidden gatherings. A pilgrim's journey was measured in blistered feet and weary prayers. After weeks of travel on dangerous roads, the sight of Glastonbury Abbey's towers promised more than just shelter. It offered a chance to step out of the world and into a state of grace. Tucked away from the main cloisters and the bustling crowds of visitors, a hidden rest chamber awaited. This was not a grand hall, but a simple, secluded room, its entrance perhaps concealed behind a wooden screen or accessed through a quiet courtyard. Inside, the air was still and cool, a stark contrast to the dust and noise of the road. A rough-hewn wooden bed with a straw-stuffed pallet promised the first true rest in days. A stone wash-basin in the corner allowed for the ritual cleansing that prepared a pilgrim to approach the sacred relics. Some of these chambers even held a hidden altar in a small niche, a space for private, heartfelt devotions before or after the public veneration at the main shrine. The discovery of pilgrim badges in these areas, small lead tokens depicting St. Thomas Becket or the Virgin Mary, confirms their use. These cheaply made souvenirs were the proof of a completed journey, purchased and perhaps first cherished in the quiet of this very room. Can you feel the profound relief of a traveler in this space, the weight of a long and perilous pilgrimage finally lifting in the silence? This was a sanctuary within a sanctuary, where the physical need for rest intertwined completely with the spiritual hunger for redemption. The Abbey was not just a destination, but a vital waypoint in a transformative personal journey. Yet while these rooms offered respite for the soul, other hidden spaces hummed with the sound of practical labor, serving the bustling economy that supported such sacred sites. The vibrant threads of faith were woven into cloth within the stone walls of York Minster itself. High in the triforium, tucked between the soaring arches, a weaver's alcove provided a sanctuary for a different kind of devotion, the craft of creating sacred textiles. This was not a grand studio, but a small, secluded cell where an artisan could work for hours on a single embroidered vestment or a complex tapestry panel. The location was deliberate, offering consistent north-facing light that poured through a dedicated window, illuminating intricate stitches and the subtle hues of dyed wool and silk without the harsh glare of direct sun. Shelves built into the stone recesses held the tools of the trade, small hand looms for narrow bands, bone needles for delicate work, and pots of precious dyes made from madder root and woad. The discovery of such spaces, often marked by residual traces of thread and discarded bone bobbins, pulls back the curtain on the anonymous craftspeople who clothed the clergy and adorned the altars. Their hidden labor was an essential part of the cathedral's life, transforming raw materials into objects of breathtaking beauty that elevated the liturgy into a multisensory experience. This quiet industry was also an economic engine, with the church acting as a major patron, commissioning works that supported local dyers, wool merchants, and the weavers themselves. The value of the finished textiles, however, was immense, making them targets for theft or damage during times of unrest. This constant threat necessitated the creation of another kind of hidden room, one designed not for creation, but for the absolute protection of these precious artifacts. The sacred and the practical were often separated by only a few feet of stone. Deep beneath the soaring Gothic arches of Westminster Abbey, a relic crypt lies in near total silence, a hidden underground chamber built to protect the most sacred objects in the medieval world. This was not a space for the living, but for the veneration of the dead, where fragments of saints' bones or a supposed splinter from the true cross were sealed away in ornate caskets. Accessed by a secret staircase that spiraled down from the main chapel, the crypt was a world of shadows and flickering candlelight. Its walls, often adorned with a simple altar, transformed the chamber into an intensely private chapel, a focal point for pilgrimage and prayer far from the public eye. These relics were not merely historical curiosities. They were believed to be conduits of divine power, capable of performing miracles and healing the sick. Their concealment within these fortified spaces was a necessity, protecting them from theft by rival churches or from desecration during periods of political turmoil. At Westminster, the crypt has safeguarded these treasures for centuries, with some still brought out into the light during special ceremonies, connecting the modern world to that ancient aura of mystery. How did hiding a sacred object, quite literally, increase its spiritual power in the eyes of the faithful? This sacred secrecy was a delicate balance of devotion and control, where the church could manage access to the divine. Yet this profound need to protect a spiritual resource finds a direct physical parallel in the next layer of hidden rooms, those engineered to secure the most mundane and essential resource of all, a reliable supply of fresh water. A fortress could starve for months, but it could only thirst for days. Deep beneath the stone courtyards of Crac des Chevaliers, a hidden cistern chamber solved this brutal equation. This was not a simple well, but a massive man-made cave carved into the living rock beneath the Crusader fortress, a subterranean lake designed to outlast any siege. Its walls were coated in a special, waterproof plaster that kept thousands of gallons of precious rainwater from seeping back into the earth. The entire castle was an instrument for capturing every drop, with intricate gutter systems channeling rainfall from vast rooftops and courtyards directly into this secret reservoir. Access was strictly controlled through concealed openings, often secured by heavy stone lids, to protect the water supply from contamination or deliberate poisoning by a clever enemy. The sheer volume of water these chambers could hold is staggering, a testament to the engineering foresight that allowed Crac to withstand assaults that would have broken lesser strongholds. Beyond its primary purpose, the chamber's naturally cool and stable environment made it an ideal pantry for storing perishable food supplies, adding another layer to its vital role. How many armies camped impatiently outside these walls, simply withered away while the defenders drew on this hidden bounty? The resilience of a castle like this was measured not just in the height of its walls, but in the depth of its reserves. This mastery of survival through concealment found its most urgent expression in spaces designed not for slow endurance, but for immediate life-or-death refuge. The true strength of a fortress was measured by how it protected its most vulnerable. Beneath the cobbled bailey of Conwy Castle, a siege shelter offered a desperate refuge for the town's families, a cramped world of fear and endurance carved directly into the earth. This was not a place for soldiers, but for the elderly, the women, and the children, a subterranean cell where the only goal was to survive the storm of arrows and stone raining down from above. Its entrance was a masterclass in camouflage, a section of the castle's formidable stonework that swung inward just enough to allow a frantic stream of people to vanish from sight. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and unwashed bodies, the only light coming from a few precious, flickering tallow lamps. Historical accounts from the Welsh uprisings suggest these spaces were stocked with the barest of essentials, barrels of water and sacks of hard biscuit, meant to sustain life for a few critical days. To make the unbearable more tolerable, some shelters featured simple stone benches carved along the walls and subtle drainage channels to carry away seeping groundwater. Can you hear the muffled cries of a child, quickly soothed, or the low, steady prayers of the adults as the thunder of a battering ram echoes faintly through the earth above? Each moment in that darkness was a negotiation between hope and sheer terror. This communal act of hiding reveals a profound, if grim, aspect of medieval life, where security meant carving a pocket of safety out of sheer rock. From these spaces built for collective physical survival, we turn to rooms designed for a different kind of sustenance entirely, the solitary nourishment of a scholar's mind. A solitary candle flickers against walls of leather-bound books. Tucked deep within the halls of Oxford University, a scholar's nook offered a fortress for the mind, a hidden cell where the intellectual revolutions of the Middle Ages were quietly forged. These were not grand libraries, but secret recesses built into the thickness of college walls or carved beneath winding staircases, private worlds for study and composition. In these cramped, intimate spaces, a figure like Roger Bacon could escape the endless debates of the quadrangle to focus on his radical work, blending observations of the natural world with philosophical inquiry. A simple desk held precious sheets of vellum, while shelves carved directly into the stone safeguarded a handful of manuscripts, each one a portal to ancient knowledge. The artifacts left behind tell a vivid story, an ink pot hardened into a solid lump, the worn nub of a goose feather quill, a smoothed piece of pumice stone used for erasing errors on parchment. Every scratch of that quill in the silence was an act of defiance against intellectual boundaries. How many world-altering ideas first took shape in such seclusion, far from the scrutinizing eyes of ecclesiastical authority? The intense focus these nooks enabled did more than just preserve old texts. It allowed for the new connections and critical questions that would ultimately seed the Renaissance. This private pursuit of knowledge existed in stark contrast to the very public application of power, where hidden rooms served not to liberate the mind but to confine the body. A heavy iron door ceiling shut was only the beginning of the terror. Below the main prison cells of the Chepstow, if a different kind of room existed, one designed not just for confinement but for erasure. This was the oubliette, a French word that means a place of forgetting. Its entrance was often nothing more than a trapdoor in the floor of an upper chamber, a feature so mundane it could be hidden under a simple rug. Once that door was bolted shut, a prisoner would be left in a pit of absolute darkness, a damp, cylindrical space with slick stone walls that offered no handhold. There was no light, no bed, and no latrine, only the cold and the company of their own despair. These were not spaces for rehabilitation or even for public punishment. They were tools of psychological warfare, used by nobles to make political rivals or inconvenient dissenters simply vanish from the world. The knowledge of the oubliettes' existence, even for those never thrown into one, cast a long shadow, a silent threat that reinforced the absolute power of the ruling class. What does it say about a society when justice could be so easily replaced by disappearance? The sheer cruelty of these pits stands as a stark reminder of how power, when unchecked, could weaponize architecture itself. Yet, even from this profound darkness, the human spirit sought light, forging hidden rooms dedicated not to punishment, but to the brilliant and hopeful work of creation. A clockmaker's hammer strikes brass with a soft, metallic tap, a sound swallowed by the thick stone of Salisbury Cathedral's tower. This hidden workshop was a sanctuary for precision, a room sequestered high above the nave where the great mechanical clock was conceived and maintained. Tucked away behind the choir screen or accessed by a narrow spiral stair, the space was a world of intricate order. Wooden benches were littered with the tools of a new science, tiny files, delicate pliers, and punches for marking gear teeth. Diagrams sketched on vellum showed complex assemblies of gears and escapements, the first blueprints for mastering time itself. The clock these craftsmen built was more than a timepiece. It was a model of the heavens, its dials displaying the movements of planets and the phases of the moon. Every precisely cut gear, every balanced weight, was a step toward taming a fundamental force of nature. The discovery of unfinished clock parts and wax models for casting in these spaces speaks to a profound, patient skill. How did this quiet labor in a hidden room change the rhythm of daily existence? The steady tolling of the cathedral bell, governed by the hidden clock, began to synchronize an entire community, from the prayers of the monks to the opening of the market stalls. This marriage of mechanical innovation and artistic vision did not end with clocks. It flourished in other secluded spaces where creators shaped beauty from raw stone and pigment. High above the main altar of the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi, a different kind of sacred work was underway. In a temporary studio built within the vast upper chapel, the air was thick with the scent of wet plaster and ground minerals. This was the artist's hidden realm, a creative cell shielded from the pilgrims below by wooden screens and canvas drapes. Here, the master painter and his team worked on a grand scaffold, their world reduced to a single section of wall that would become part of the life of St. Francis' cycle. The studio was a hive of focused industry. Assistants mixed pigments on wooden palettes, blending earth tones like ochre and umber with precious lapis lazuli for the Virgin Mary's brilliant blue robe. The fresco technique itself demanded secrecy and speed, requiring the artist to apply his colors onto a fresh, damp plaster patch called a giornata, which would bind the image to the wall for eternity as it dried. Every brushstroke was a race against time, a permanent decision made in a single session. In the quiet moments, tools were stored and sketches were hidden in narrow niches built into the chapel's own structure, keeping the messy mechanics of creation separate from the divine spectacle it produced. What profound devotion is captured in the patient layering of a saint's halo, or the careful rendering of a grieving face? The emotions channeled in this room were not just those of the biblical figures being depicted, but of the artists themselves, pouring their own faith and craft into a narrative that would inspire millions. This hidden studio was not a solitary garret, but a collaborative workshop, a model for the communal spirit that would soon flourish in the next type of hidden room, where artisans and merchants gathered in secret to shape the economic and social fabric of their cities. A heavy ledger book lies open in the flickering torchlight, its pages filled with the careful script of commerce. Deep beneath the Guildhall of Ghent, a hidden vault served as the clandestine heart of a powerful economic brotherhood. This was not a place for public feasts or ceremonies, but for the secret discussions that shaped the market itself. Here, masters of a craft, from weavers to goldsmiths, would gather in absolute privacy, their meeting place concealed behind a movable bookcase or a section of paneling that blended seamlessly with the hall above. Their purpose was to guard the lifeblood of their trade, the closely held secrets of their techniques, the agreed-upon prices for their goods, and the strict regulations that governed membership and quality. These subterranean chambers were fortresses of privilege and protection. Iron-bound chests secured inside held the guild's most sensitive possessions, its official seal for stamping authenticated goods, its detailed account books, and its ceremonial silver mace, a symbol of its hard-won authority from the crown. The discovery of these artifacts, from wax seal stamps to lists of member fines, confirms that these rooms were the administrative engines of medieval urban life. How did a simple weaver or silversmith, sworn to secrecy in this vault, help build the foundations of modern capitalism? By controlling knowledge and standardizing quality away from the prying eyes of rivals, these hidden meetings created stable markets and fostered a sense of collective identity that could challenge the power of nobles and kings. This intricate web of economic secrecy, spun in rooms beneath the city streets, required a parallel network of hidden spaces to support the people who moved the goods, the merchants and travelers who needed secure lodging far from home. The scent of spices and the weight of coins filled the air in a hidden room above a Bruges canal. This was a merchant's lodging, a discreet chamber tucked behind the bustling facade of a shop or warehouse, serving as a private office, a secure storeroom, and a temporary home for traders from across Europe. During the great trade fairs, when the city swelled with competitors and opportunists, these unassuming spaces became fortresses of commerce, furnished with a simple bed, a sturdy table, and iron-bound chests. The room was a sanctuary where a merchant could tally his ledger by candlelight, far from the prying eyes of rivals. The chests themselves were often the first layer of security, but the walls and floors held deeper secrets. Historical records show that many such lodgings featured hidden compartments, a loose floorboard under a rug or a hollowed-out section of a wall beam, perfect for concealing a pouch of gold florins or a sensitive contract. The location was everything, with direct access to the canals allowing precious cargoes of English wool or Flemish cloth to be loaded and unloaded directly from a back door, bypassing the crowded, thief-ridden streets. Every transaction sealed here was a gamble, a balance between the immense reward of a successful venture and the catastrophic risk of shipwreck, banditry, or simple betrayal. What kind of man endured this life of constant travel and paranoia, his entire fortune and future secured only by the thickness of a hidden door? He operated in a world of tangible goods and hard currency, his faith placed in ledgers and locks. Yet this very world of commerce and earthly striving existed alongside a realm of intense spirituality, where hidden rooms were not for safeguarding goods, but for witnessing divine visions that transcended the material altogether. A faint scratch of a quill was the only sound in the stone cell at Fountains Abbey. This was the visionary's retreat, a hidden space where a mystic could withdraw from the communal rhythms of monastic life to pursue a direct and personal encounter with the divine. Tucked away in the abbey's remote corners, perhaps within a ruined section of the cloister or a chamber built against the cold outer wall, the cell was a world of intentional poverty. A simple straw pallet for rest, a small writing desk, and a single candle for light were the only comforts. Here, in the profound silence broken only by the wind and the whisper of prayer, the anchoress or hermit would meditate for hours, seeking visions and recording their revelations on scraps of parchment. These were not casual retreats but profound spiritual exercises, a stripping away of the self to become a vessel for heavenly messages. The writings that emerged from such seclusion, like those of the mystic Julian of Norwich, would go on to influence Christian thought for centuries, offering a deeply personal theology of divine love. Artifacts recovered from similar cells tell a quiet story: a worn set of prayer beads, the faint graphite trace of a sketched cross, a small clay lamp blackened with soot. Each object speaks to a life dedicated not to action but to the intense internal work of faith. How did these solitary figures, hidden away in their stone cells, shape the spiritual landscape of an entire age? Their private revelations became public light, offering a path to God that was intimate and accessible, a counterpoint to the grand ceremonies of the Church. This profound focus on spiritual readiness finds a stark and practical counterpart in the next type of hidden room, where the preparations were not for the soul's salvation, but for the body's brutal defense. A single sword, oiled and ready, waits in a darkness untouched by sunlight for years. This was the reality within the hidden armory cache of Bodiam Castle, a secret stockpile of violence kept just out of sight until the moment it was desperately needed. Tucked behind a false section of the gatehouse wall or beneath a heavy flagstone, this was not the main, visible arsenal. This was a contingency plan carved in stone, a final reserve of swords, crossbow bolts, and chainmail links. The strategic genius was in its location, placing these weapons in the very heart of the castle's most vulnerable and critical point, the gatehouse. In the chaos of a surprise attack or a breach in the outer walls, a garrison could not afford to sprint across open courtyards to a distant storage tower. They needed to rearm instantly, right at the point of contact. The silent, swift distribution of weapons from such a cache could turn the tide of a close-quarters fight in the narrow stairwells and passages of the gatehouse itself. Maintenance was a quiet, constant ritual. A designated soldier would be tasked with the secret, regularly descending into the hidden space to inspect each blade for rust, to wax the strings of the crossbows to keep them supple, and to ensure that every piece of armor was free of weak links. This was not a dusty storage closet. It was a living, breathing part of the castle's defensive nervous system, its contents kept in a state of perfect readiness. How many assaults were repelled because a handful of defenders managed to grab freshly sharpened swords from a hidden compartment just as the main gate splintered? The existence of this cache speaks to a mindset that anticipated every possible disaster. This meticulous preparation for combat finds its logical and most chilling extension in the next kind of hidden room, a place not for fighting but for a final, desperate surrender to fate. When the outer walls finally crumbled, the last line of defense was a room no larger than a closet. At Rochester Castle, during the brutal Barons' Wars, a hidden panic room offered a final, desperate sanctuary for the noble family and their closest guards. This was not a space for fighting, but for enduring those last few hours of a siege, a claustrophobic cell built into the deepest part of the stone keep. Its entrance was a slab of stone so perfectly fitted into the wall that it became invisible, swinging inward only under immense pressure to reveal a cramped, dark interior. Within, the air would have been thick with dust and fear, the only light a thin sliver from a cleverly concealed ventilation shaft that also served as a listening post for sounds of the battle above. These rooms were stocked with the barest essentials: a small cask of water, a sack of hardened biscuits, and perhaps a cache of weapons for a final, futile stand. Some, like the one at Rochester, were rumored to have a secondary escape route, a narrow tunnel leading to a forgotten postern gate, offering a sliver of hope for a stealthy exit under cover of darkness. The psychological impact of such a refuge cannot be overstated. For the defenders, knowing this ultimate bolt hole existed provided a grim kind of courage, allowing them to fight on long after a castle without one would have surrendered. For the attackers, the very possibility of a hidden panic room meant their victory was never truly complete until every last stone had been pried apart. How does the mind cope trapped in that silent darkness, waiting to be saved or discovered? This architecture of final desperation represents the absolute extreme of the medieval impulse to hide and survive. Yet, from this profound focus on earthly survival, we find a dramatic pivot in the very next hidden room, where the gaze turned away from the castle walls and toward the infinite expanse of the night sky. A single star's position could determine the fate of a kingdom. High within the spires of Prague Castle, a hidden astrologer's turret offered an unbroken view of the heavens, a secret laboratory where celestial movements were meticulously tracked and translated into political advice. This was not a grand observatory, but a cramped, circular room built into the upper reaches of a fortified tower, its narrow slit windows perfectly aligned for sightings of specific constellations without the light and smoke of the city below. Inside, the air was still and cold, a world of parchment and precision. A central table held a brass astrolabe, its intricate repair and plates gleaming in the candlelight, used to measure the altitude of stars and planets. Shelves carved into the stone were packed with hand-copied charts and manuscripts, their pages filled with complex tables predicting planetary conjunctions and eclipses. The secrecy of this room was paramount, for the predictions made here were considered matters of state. Historical records suggest that rulers like the Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV consulted his court astrologer on everything from the optimal date for a coronation to the strategic timing of a military campaign. The astrologer's calculations, a potent blend of early astronomy and mystical belief, were thought to reveal the hidden currents of fate that governed human affairs. How did this cosmic council, born in a hidden turret, shape the political landscape of Europe? The meticulous observations recorded in these rooms slowly accumulated, inadvertently contributing to a more accurate understanding of the solar system even as they served superstition. This need to control the environment for the study of delicate charts finds a direct, practical parallel in the next type of hidden room, where the goal was not to read the stars, but to preserve the food and medicine that sustained life on Earth. A castle's hospitality was measured in the freshness of its feast. Deep beneath the manicured grounds of Leeds Castle, a hidden icehouse cell functioned as a subterranean refrigerator, a silent, cold chamber dug deep into the earth to preserve ice and perishable foods throughout the entire year. This was not a simple cellar, but a marvel of passive cooling engineering. The chamber itself was often a bottle-shaped pit, dug into a north-facing hillside or beneath a protective building to leverage the ground's natural insulation. Its builders would meticulously line the pit with brick or stone, and then pack the entire structure in thick layers of straw, reeds, and earth, creating a thermal barrier that kept the summer heat out and the winter cold in. During the coldest months, laborers would harvest blocks of ice from frozen ponds and lakes, transporting them to the icehouse to be stacked in this insulated tomb. The strategic genius extended to the entrance, which was often concealed or located in a remote part of the castle grounds to protect the valuable, temperature-sensitive contents from theft or tampering. At Leeds, the cell's design included a clever gravel base and a subtle drainage channel to carry away meltwater, ensuring the remaining ice stayed solid for as long as possible. How did this simple hidden room transform life within the castle walls? It allowed for the storage of fresh meat and dairy long after the slaughter, and it was vital for preserving medicinal supplies that would spoil in the heat. This was not just about luxury, it was about health and the power to offer gracious hospitality to important guests in any season, a clear display of a lord's wealth and foresight. This practical mastery of the environment, hidden just beneath the grass, reveals a society increasingly focused on comfort and control. And from these spaces of quiet preservation, we are drawn toward the final secret, hidden rooms designed not for survival or storage, but for pure, unadulterated pleasure. The final hidden room was not a place of fear or survival, but of pure, unadulterated joy. Tucked behind the grand hall of Kenilworth Castle, the Minstrel's Green Room was a sanctuary for artists, a hidden backstage where the magic of a medieval feast was carefully orchestrated. Before the fanfare and applause, this was where lutes were tuned to perfection, where singers warmed their voices in hushed tones, and where players of the shawm and sackbut coordinated their musical acts away from the eager eyes of the noble audience. Far from being a simple waiting area, this room was a creative crucible. Its walls, likely adorned with vibrant tapestries to dampen sound and inspire the performers, provided a rare moment of quiet focus. Wooden benches offered a place to rest, while small, secure compartments built into the stonework safeguarded delicate instruments and precious sheet music, protecting the tools of the trade from damage or theft. The strategic placement of this green room reveals a sophisticated understanding of entertainment logistics. Its proximity to the castle's tiltyard was no accident. It allowed for a seamless fusion of spectacle. At a moment's notice, a hidden door or passage could open, and a troupe of musicians would emerge, their fanfares perfectly timed to herald the entrance of jousting knights or to elevate the drama of a mock battle. This synchronization of sound and action transformed a simple tournament into an immersive theatrical experience. What does the care taken to create such a space tell us about medieval courtly life? It shows that the power of music and performance was deeply understood, valued not just as background noise, but as an essential component of a lord's prestige and his ability to captivate his guests. These hidden rooms enriched the very fabric of daily life, proving that the medieval world's secrets were not only for protection, but for celebration. These hidden chambers were not isolated oddities, but the direct product of their turbulent times. The medieval world was a tapestry woven from the threads of feudalism, deep religious faith, and near-constant warfare. This volatile mix created an overwhelming need for security that drove architectural innovation for centuries. Early fortifications were often simple wooden motte and bailey structures, their defenses obvious and their secrets few. But as siege technology advanced, so too did the castle, evolving into formidable stone fortresses where hidden rooms became a sophisticated layer of the defensive plan. The very stones tell a story of escalating threats. The Crusades opened new trade routes and brought new ideas back to Europe, but they also intensified conflict and the need to protect holy relics and church wealth. Later, the sheer devastation of the Black Death created societal chaos, making secure storage for food, medicine, and legal documents a matter of communal survival. Architectural breakthroughs made this secrecy possible. The development of the pointed arch and the ribbed vault did more than just create soaring cathedrals. These innovations allowed builders to distribute weight in new ways, creating unused voids and concealed spaces within thick walls and beneath grand floors. A stone fortress was no longer just a blunt instrument of power. It was a complex puzzle box with its most vital functions often hidden in plain sight. How did a society's deepest fears and highest aspirations become physically embedded in its architecture? The answer lies in the steady refinement of the mason's craft, turning simple shelters into intricate machines for living and for hiding. This evolution connects a humble priest hole to a grand papal chamber, revealing a unified mindset across all levels of medieval society. The drive to conceal was as fundamental as the drive to build. Our journey through 30 hidden rooms ends not with a closed door, but with an open invitation. Each of these spaces, from the treasury vaults of Dover to the siege shelters of Conway, is a frozen moment in time, a testament to the incredible ingenuity of the medieval mind. They were not built in times of peace and prosperity, but from a powerful, universal drive, the need to protect what is most precious, whether that was a person, a prayer, a pound of silver, or a single, life-saving loaf of bread. These chambers teach us that history is not just a list of kings and battles. It is the story of a carpenter silently pivoting a staircase to save a life, of a scribe illuminating a page in solitary devotion, and of an entire community huddled in darkness, waiting for the storm above to pass. They reveal the full spectrum of human experience, from our deepest fears to our most profound hopes. The next time you walk through an ancient castle or a quiet village church, pause for a moment. Look at the walls, the floors, the seemingly ordinary nooks. Consider the hidden histories resting just inches away. I encourage you to seek out these places for yourself, to stand in the silence where so much was once at stake. Share your own discoveries and reflections in the comments below. Thank you for joining this exploration into the secret heart of the Middle Ages. If your curiosity is stirred, subscribe for more journeys into the past, and may you always find wonder in the stories hidden just beneath the surface.